Hi, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everyone around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session hosted by ICF Chennai, Coaching for Growth, ICF India Conclave. I'm Bhaskar Natarajan. I'm a PCC with ICF. And it's a pleasure and honor for me to introduce two gentlemen who have wonderful career. And especially, I'm quite happy to share that they have had wonderful illustrious jobs and titles and companies that they have worked. It's a privilege for me to introduce them. And this topic, as you all know, is role of coaching in a leader's world. So we have been talking about coaches and how coaches can bring about transformation in the individual, team, organization, and system. This time we get to hear directly from the leaders themselves. And these two individuals are quite accomplished. And Mr. Pradhan has more than 3 decades of experience, and Mr. Joe Kuruvilla has more than 2 decades of experience. Both of them are not a stranger to corporate India. Since it's a global conclave, I would bow to all the women leaders out there. We will keep that aspect as well on our minds while we represent leaders across the globe. And also, we respect and honor diversity and inclusion in organizations, even if it is a self-employed or if you're an entrepreneur running your own entity. We hope these messages will resonate with you and you will take away lots of inputs where you could make a change in the way that you are appearing and presenting yourself in the society around you. So with that, it's my complete honor and pleasure to introduce Mr. John Kuruvilla. He's currently the President and Chief Executive Officer at Raymond Lifestyle Limited. He started as a management trainee with HUL and moved across Unilever PLC for more than 2 decades in sales, marketing, digital transformation, and various profit and loss roles across Asia and Europe. He has also handled various of these roles in developed and emerging markets across the spectrum of local, regional, and global responsibilities. So thank you, Joe, for agreeing to speak to us. And thanks to Vijay for roping you in to have this interaction with us. You are currently pursuing post-graduation in coaching certification program with ILM Level 7 UK, right?
That's right.
And you also mentioned that there are few trivias that you have, for all our audience out here. One is, ladies and gentlemen, Joe has been in 7 different schools in the first 12 years of his formative life because his father had a transferable job being in armed forces. And then he confesses that he's a nomad. The second trivia about Joe is he loves reading. He likes to read 4 to 5 books at a time, and that too from different genre. And his secret is there are many books lying around at home which are not read yet. That's something I resonate with you, Joe. I'm also someone who keeps buying book, and wherever inspiration draws me, I go to those authors and models. The last one is you are a enthusiast of handwriting, and you analyze handwriting, and you are someone who is clued on to digital transformation. I wonder how that plays a role in your journey as a leader. So I understand that you have prepared a set of messages for our audience, given the context, given the topic that we have. So I would like you to say a few words as an introductory message, and then your message for the audience. Thank you, Joe, for being here again.
Great. Thank you very much, Bhaskar, for a wonderful introduction. And I think it's really a pleasure and a privilege to be in this wonderful forum of the ICF. And as I put together the deck that basically I wanted to share with you, I really also wanted to use this occasion to also check on all of you in terms of your families and the near and dear ones as to during this crisis have been safe, and all of you are in good health and in good hands. These are extraordinary times. And I must say that humanity has shown its resilience, its optimism, and its bounce back abilities. And hats off to all of you leaders and coaches who have actually played a massive role in this rather big crisis, in this rather constrained environment. And I personally believe that crisis actually brings out the best in us. And I think the human spirit, as we all know, over all these centuries, have actually prevailed. And I am of the opinion that this particular crisis indeed would bring us a lot of lessons, but will continue to make humanity a much more stronger force as we continue to combat the future world going ahead. Today's context is, as all of you know, is a VUCA world. And I must confess that for me, the VUCA is actually in super capital letters. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's clearly complex, and it is ambiguous. And I think situations have continued to evolve, especially during these times. And I think one of the aspects which I wanted to bring together and to highlight and share with all of you, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that experiences and situations do shape our outlook in life. I think the way I look at it is that the way we actually respond as a leader or a professional clearly shapes up ultimately the overall outcome of any situation. And I think in this particular session, I wanted to share with you 4 such situations in which I will attempt to share with all of you one key reflection per situation, which actually allowed me to actually grow and to a large extent grow my organization. Each of these reflections, I must confess, it clearly didn't come out of me myself, but it was actually a culmination of the efforts which my bosses, my mentors, my coaches, and most importantly, my people actually were able to contribute. And I think this particular session, in a sense, actually is dedicated to all those who have actually believed in my becoming a better version of myself every day. And I think if I look at it in terms of the starting point in any journey, I thought it would be absolutely correct for me to start with what is called as the first point in any journey, which is really about knowing thyself. And what better way than to actually articulate the purpose of my life. And this was an opportunity which I was given in 2011 when I was in one of the Unilever leadership programs. And this became my North Star, which actually enabled me to actually make decisions, actually made the choices in my roles, and the kind of impact which I wanted in my life, in my family's life, and also in the organizations that I had the opportunity to lead. And my attempt here actually is to share with you how important it is to anchor oneself with a clear purpose. And I think one of the elements which I also wanted to leave with all of you is the aspect of retaining one's authenticity. At the same time, being able to flex your leadership style according to the situation, where one needs to be jumping in, opening up, listening, and changing oneself as you take on the new challenges and bring about, hopefully, a positive outcome. And my purpose in life really was to raising my staff and leading the people across the Red Sea to the Promised Land, obviously inspired by the biblical character of Moses, where he led his people out of Egypt onto their Promised Land. And I think that was something which I kept in mind as I navigated my steps, which basically was something which I began as the first situation, which was really a transformation situation. And it's a story which I have really is the role that I played in East Europe for the fact of digital transformation, where we realized that consumers are moving pretty much out of the analog world and moving into the digital world. The whole idea of building a holistic digital ecosystem, as much as it was very exciting, actually was a very scary point in my life. And I think the reason why I say that is basically because from about 20 years of my life where I clearly knew pretty much everything and I could tell my people what's the next thing they can actually anticipate, I came to a point during this transformation where I actually didn't have an iota of understanding of the digital transformation. And here I was, that the organization decided that I would probably be the right person to go into it. And I think one of the things which, apart from the journey which was played out, one of the key reflection in this particular journey really was the fact that I had to develop the humility of saying, I don't know. And I think that was a big realization for me, where from where I knew pretty much everything, I had to actually take on the adage of, I don't know. And that basically was a big journey in which I went back to school, actually went to the Colombian Business School for a digital transformation course, began to start listening to all the digital experts across the world, and most importantly, actually got a team which went on to not be just my part of my team, but actually became my mentors. And I think this concept of reverse mentoring, as the buzzword would be, was absolutely the right thing which came through in my journey, in which I had probably not an iota of understanding of what this journey was all about, but I actually took on this thing about saying something of I don't know, which was a very difficult part for me. But I think that was a big realization which came through and which hopefully culminated into something which was very exciting for the digital transformation in East Europe. The next situation, which and a story which I would love to share with all of you, is it's really around performance, and I think the thought was that it was performance for a business in a very complex situation like in Southeast Asia and Australia, where the growth was not really as per the ambition of the organization and as per the market opportunity. And I was given this opportunity to lead a rather interesting but a very complex region, which consisted of 15 markets, quite a few intricacies of the market. And I was told that I would need to turn around this entire business and really take it from a single-digit growth to a double-digit growth. And I think where the results might have been very exciting, where we put together a great strategy, pulled together a great plan, I think one of the things which I basically learned as a reflection of this particular experience of pulling up the performance was this entire thing of the fact, the short term and the long term. In 4 years' time, we were actually able to double the size of the business. But what was most interesting and the biggest learning that I had really was the fact that I was able to leave behind a set of leaders who took on that growth trajectory and continued on that journey, where the business continued the growth trajectory that we have been able to achieve in the first few years of our journey. And I think as a leader, that was a big learning for me to say it isn't important just to achieve success when you're around, but it's very important for you to develop the people around you who can actually take that journey ahead. There are times when they call me up and say that the journey is on, and that really is very, very exciting and extremely satisfying as a leader. And I think that being said, the third experience and a story which really was something which I really enjoyed was this entire thing on partnerships. And as you know that today's world and the challenges seem to be so complex that not a single entity would be able to resolve it. And I think collaboration is becoming what I believe a very, very important ingredient in business and in all our engagements going forward. And this was a time when I was a global brand director for a hygiene brand, a $500 million brand in Unilever portfolio called Domestos. And Domestos decided, along with the whole Unilever world, that we will actually go on to take on this entire cause of sanitation. Given the fact that 2.4 billion people do not have access to it, we believe that the brand could actually do some work around it in order for us to bring about a positive impact. And this was a time when we decided to go in and partner with the United Nations, specifically the UNICEF. And I must tell you that the way we had to go in was the fact that we actually had to have the humility to say that we really do not understand it. And I think the reflection that I had when I engaged with UNICEF was that they were extremely distressful of corporations given our commercial interest in this entire cause. And I think it was a wonderful year and a half where we engaged with them and the trust developed. And the reflection I had during this wonderful collaborative venture was really about understanding first the person across you before being understood. This culminated in the United Nations declaring the World Sanitation Day by the UN Assembly for November 19th, way back in 2014. And I think that really was a big revelation for me, where I really understood that it is extremely important that when you walk into the room, you first really need to understand the person in front of you and really understanding the context in which the person comes in before really unraveling your expertise and capability. And that was something which I took forward in my journey across all my engagements, where the tendency to be what I call be a hero in the room been very high. It's very important that if in case you want to make an impact together, it's important to be humble and to walk hand in hand, creating the trust and making sure that we understand the partner before being understood. And the fourth situation, which I would call as a situation which was really about change management, is my current role as the CEO for Raymond Lifestyle. It's about $1 billion organization in an industry which, as all of you know, have been very adversely impacted in terms of the COVID lockdowns. And I was given charge of it last year, and I came in from an industry which was a consumer industry. And the expectations was obviously sky high, where I was supposed to be going and telling everyone how to sort out and how to really come out of this particular crisis. But given the journey that I've had across this particular set of years, I really took on this entire journey in a slightly different way. And I must say the journey is still ongoing. And the reflection I had and the learning I had was that it was very important for me not to get into a telling mode as to how to get there. But it was very important for me as a leader to share with my people as to where we would like to go. And as I think George Patton, the General Patton, said that never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with your ingenuity. And I think that was a reflection that I continue to have as I lead the organization during this particular crisis. And we hope that this particular reflection is something which will allow the organization to actually be sustaining success in the long term and not just in the short term. And I think when I talked about the fact that it was a purpose which anchored my journey, and I continue to flex my style of leadership across different situations, there was an amazing thing which basically I went through. And this was almost took a decade. As you know, I articulated my purpose in a particular way. By the end of this decade, if I might say, I actually took on a slightly different purpose, which was a bit of a reflection of my entire set of experiences. And it was articulated in a way which is about raising my staff and shepherding my flock across their Red Seas to their promised land. And I think that significant shift has really been about identifying the Red Seas and the promised lands as per the people and not as per what I, as a leader, would like them to do. And I think that revelation and that reflection has stood me in good stead. And I think at the end, what I would like to say is that it's a wonderful balance that one needs to have in terms of authenticity, which is probably your North Star or the purpose as you would articulate it, and at the same time, be able to change, to learn, and to adapt to the situations that you are basically being told to lead and work on. It was a pleasure, and I hand it over to Bhaskar to take the proceedings further.
Thank you, Joe. In fact, I'm looking at the comments on the chat window. It's heartwarming to see people are getting that energy and inspiration from your narratives. You have covered 4 different narratives by covering saying humility to say, I don't know, is okay for a leader. And what I liked about the narrative is they didn't just form part of your team, they became mentors, and reverse mentoring was happening. And then you were about to pull up the performance of people, and you realize that you are creating more giants and not dwarfs. And finally, the trust building exercise with the institution, how we should as a leader understand first before being understood. And finally, you spoke about moving out of comfort zone. Where you go is far more important than how you get there. So all these 4 narratives wonderfully captured key insights. And thank you so much for your authentic presence and all the narratives that you shared.
Great. Thank you, Bhaskar. Looking forward to
Stay
Satish.
back. We have Q&A coming up. Now it's my honor and privilege to introduce a veteran who has more than 40 years of experience. I'm talking about Mr. Pradhan. Namaste, sir. Thank you so much. I really thoroughly enjoyed the preparatory sessions that we had. Your depth and wisdom came through in the questions that you asked on how to prepare, message for our audience. And for the audience, they may not know that Mr. Pradhan is a chartered fellow of CIPD, which is equivalent to a PhD in finance. And now he is a leadership coach. He is on board of various organizations. And many of you may not know that he has done masters in history from Delhi University. And then he had a privilege of spending entire semester in 2009 in SAID Business School at Oxford, where he is the first executive in residence teaching, guiding, undertaking research there in that prestigious institution. And also, Mr. Pradhan is on the various boards of large companies, and his guidance and also advice is very much sought after, and he is a speaker in many circles. Thanks to Vijay for bringing him to us. And Mr. Pradhan, over to you for your key message. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bhaskar, and thank you, ICF and Vijay, for inviting me. It's an absolute delight and a pleasure to be here today with all of you. I cannot inquire after your health and hear you, but I certainly can pray and wish all of you are good and healthy and in the best of spirits that will enable you to do great things as you go into this period of COVID and what the world is going through. So all my prayers and good wishes to all of you. It's a difficult act to follow a, bright, young, bushy-tailed guy like Joe with so much of genuineness and energy, sort of pouring out of his whole being and such wisdom. I shall endeavor not to let him down by sharing with you a few things that come to mind as I heard him and as we talked about what this session really was about. Um, and it took me back to two things way back in the 80s, when it's possible many of you were not born. Uh, but I was into my second job. And apart from reading good stuff like Carl Rogers and helping relationships, etc., I was also building my first team at CMC, uh, having a master's in history, 5 years of industrial relations experience in Rourkela steel plant, in a tech organization of those days, uh, trying to create a completely new organization and build uh, a hardware software entity in the government purview. And so I started building my team. I went around to the campuses, literally like a mendicant, proudly stating that we were the worst paymasters on any of these campuses, and hired people from IIM Ahmedabad, from XLRI, and from TIS to be my first team. In a way, as I look back and as I thought then, I thought I was garnering the best and the brightest. And in reality, as I reflect on it, I was building a team of masters who could mentor and coach me because I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the benefit of the HR education they had and the reading and the knowledge that they had been through. And the organization needed it at that time. So for me, Joe's narrative about reverse mentoring rang so true and so real uh, that it is amazing that I can put myself back in those days, and perhaps I didn't think about it so consciously. Uh, and I'll pick this thread up as we go along to more recent times. The point about understanding that Joe made rings so true with me as well. The nuance that I would add is that being able to understand the need and the context of whom I was present with, uh, to me has and had two parts: a cognitive part and a affective part. So cognitive part was about understanding the facts, understanding the cognition of the grounded context. The affective has always been about how does it feel to be there. Uh, Many years later, when I was learning how to teach the Harvard case method in a classroom from gurus like Das Narayan Das and Nitin Noria, and uh, throwing in bits of C.K. Prahlad for good measure, God bless his soul, uh, the emotive experience of the leader's dilemma was the single biggest contribution to the learning of the participants that I was told I should endeavor to create. And that has pushed me to spread that learning into every experience of mine when I've been trying to understand, uh, hear, as well as uh, listen to understand the feelings as well. The other thing that it brings home to me is that often the affective and the aspirational uh, followed each other. So cognitively, I got it, and I experienced uh, a kind of, yes, I understand and I know the logic. This makes a lot of sense to me, and yet the practice of doing it took a bit of time, and I can sense some of that lag in a lot of people that I work with, uh, as I have sensed with myself. Uh, and therefore, to me, there were 3 or 4 things around this world of being a leader that uh, hit me very hard. Early enough, I think the reality that um, unlike what I had earlier thought in my career, that the whole idea of becoming a leader was about developing expertise in one area, to become the go-to person in that area and have all the answers. And that perhaps was an appropriate model in those days. But I think it very soon changed into um, understanding and living and working with a fair degree of relish with the fact that I don't and I can't have all the answers. And the answers will come from others. It's then my role as a leader uh, to actually um, get people to stand up, step up, be inspired, uh, be energized, and enable them to be able to make their contribution and flower and flourish. In the bargain, the job gets done. Fast forward to today, enter COVID, and it seems a much more widespread realization that we don't have the answers. Individually, we don't, certainly. And even collectively, we are struggling. And so, for leaders of organizations and leaders of all kinds, I think that the writing on the wall that has really hit everyone is we have to rely on collective wisdom. And even then, we will struggle. And so, we have to recognize that working together, an essential part of the heart of leadership, has changed to the coaching metaphor. It still is possible in many areas, and I do encounter occasionally the people who still feel that they have to direct people to do what needs to be done, and people will efficiently do it. Um, will it? And that um, living in denial is still a challenge which many of us have to work with uh, to make the impossible possible uh, in a realistic time frame, in a time frame that doesn't put us into the kind of dilemmas that haunt the authenticity that Joe talked about. So, cognitively, we know that the big choices that the leaders of our countries, of our uh, municipalities, of our state governments uh, had was what level of death count by COVID is acceptable and what level of starvation by lockdowns is the trade off. Where does the trade off take place? When framed like that, it becomes a win lose question. And that brings me to the second experience that I gained, learning a lot from uh, colleagues and wise people whom I had the good fortune to have conversations with. Was a major role is played by how we frame the issues and what kind of questions do we frame for ourselves and for people whom we are trying to help. Uh, so on the axis of coaching and uh, what I call presence, uh, being trustworthy, uh, being a reasonably truthful mirror when needed is part of being trustworthy. The humility and the honesty to be able to say, I don't know, uh, or we have to figure this out differently, uh, is part of how we create trust amongst others for our genuineness. To understand both empathy and mindfulness, I've learned, are key to being able to understand and to be able to be understood. Uh, the third lesson that I think is very important, uh, told wisdom. Uh, wisdom expressed as a distillate of my experience to you is secondary. It's important, those conversations are important, but primary is the discovery of your own truth. The lessons I learned on my own and was had my own aha moment, for many others around me, was, what are you getting so excited about? This was pretty obvious from day one. But those were lessons that I had learned, and that was my truth. And that lesson and that learning stayed with me for a longer period of time. And so it was about creating those experiences and framing those questions which would enable people to be reflective and to be pursuant of what Joe called being the better version of yourself. Uh, in helping others, the other credibility builder is being able to create a genuine understanding of your intent. Very, very tricky, often the elephant in the room. Is the intent for me to improve my metrics on talent management or the leadership pipeline, or my lists, as Joe will recall from our common sinful past with the great multinational? Um, no. Are you able to create a genuine experience of being vested in the success of the other person? That can only happen if you genuinely are committed to helping them. And therefore, I think um, it's important that we learn from these. Uh, I'd just like to go back to what I had said earlier about the first team and being mentored. In 2015, I joined the board of a company. The standard conversational vocabulary was blockchain and payment platforms and gateways and AI and machine learning and stuff that, although I'm reasonably tech savvy, I was completely innocent of any degree of understanding or depth of some of these emerging uh, meteors that were blazing across the skies of the digital march that we were going through in this country and globally. And so my first request to the leader of the company in the board was to request a young manager who knew something about blockchain, uh, cloud computing, uh, open source configurations and procurement, um, payment security risks, to run me through a coaching session every Friday for the next 3 months. Uh, at first, the reaction was one of being embarrassed. Then the reaction was one of being awkward. And finally, I did manage to get hold of a coach to help me. Uh, and it was perhaps the most amazing learning that I've been through. Not as a teacher teaching a subject, but as a coach helping me to learn. This youngster was an amazing example of the kind of things that we need to see happening in the world of coaching. So, um, two final messages, I think, People like Joe, we need many more of them. And we need people like Joe to build a organizational capability of coaching as a part of leadership development. If that's the way we do things here, that's the way we start doing things in an organization. This will sit inside the woodwork and become a resilient, adaptable, and enduring capability that it is difficult for anybody to create in a hurry. And let's hope we get there fast. My personal metric that I've tried to use is to ask myself the question after any interaction with any individual, maybe coaching or not, but more so coaching and leadership opportunities. Did I leave them even a little bit better off than they were when we first interacted? And I'm sure all of you will be doing much more in that. And my God, my blessings to you. May God cherish your journey and sprinkle it with um, magic dust of great endeavor, great humility, and great success. God bless you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And just summarize what I am taking away from your speech is more about not just relying on our own expertise. Be bold enough to say, I can't know everything, and sometimes I don't know everything. And they could be working together and getting a collective wisdom to support the organization move forward. And you also spoke about discovery of our own, and these ahas would stay longer with the leader than any other borrowed insight or information. And you also mentioned about how leaders can create coaching as an organizational capability as a part of leadership development. Thank you so much for all your insights. You have 40 years of experience spanning various groups, mainly Tata Group, which is known for ethics and growing leaders. You have been an instrumental, powerful force on tasks, which is like an equivalent of IAS, grooming senior leaders within a group like Tata. I would like to open this Q&A session with you, and then I would move to Joe, sir. Is that okay with you?
Fine.
Right. So there are a lot of questions coming in terms of what do you think on various aspects. One of them caught my attention is you are being a historian. There's one question on what do you think about Afghan. You don't have to answer that. I just wanted to place it in front of you. So people are curious since you are a masters in history. Perhaps you may have some points or opinions to share. Would you like to take that, or shall I move on to the next one?
I just like to, I won't answer that question perhaps the way they wanted, but I'm using that as an opportunity to make a point about the whole mindset of coaching and leadership. And one very important element is understanding and diversity.
Right.
Uh, the history of that part of the world and the cultural context, we are very far from an understanding of that. Uh, for us to have a happier world, a more meaningful and a more substantive uh, global community of nations, it's an excellent example for us to truly begin by saying, can we understand something that is different? We've had 3 wars with the British who tried to conquer the tribals, and they didn't learn the lessons. We've had the Russians who went there and they did their thing, and they didn't teach us any lessons. So uh, all of these have got lessons of leadership for a leader who doesn't have to go to Afghanistan, but he's making sense of the world around him. And that's why I like the question that was asked by whoever it was. uh,
Vinita.
yeah, Vinita, that is connecting unconnected dots and distilling wisdom for yourself, talking to people about those insights, refining the way you create those ahas for yourself.
Yes, sir. With that, also hoping and praying that women out there would experience empowerment and continue to live life of fullest without any constraint as we go forward. And same, Vinita Joseph has got one more question. This is she's curious to understand how can a coach help a leader to embody an agile and nimble mindset given all the challenges and uncertainty we are facing today.
Simple answer would be the way they would help in many other facets of how the leader is doing and what they're doing. Uh, I think the presumption that there is a gap is an outside in evaluation.
Hmm.
And you need to hold that in a bit of abeyance to pursue the journey of self discovery by the leader of what really is holding them up. Come from there. So, what I meant by framing questions, frame this, hold your diagnosis not as a judgment or evaluation, but on the side, and probe where the gaps in the perception of your coachee are impeding progress in their mind. Work backwards from there. So that's the discovery in their context, not your imposition.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And at this point, I would like to invite Joe as well. Would you have any thoughts to share with our audience, especially on Vinita's question?
Thank
How
you,
to,
Bhaskar. I
yeah.
think given the, we are always in the midst of many intelligent people, but clearly with Satish out here, I'm clearly in the company of a very wise person. Really, it was a absolutely inspirational talk from Satish, and I was sitting down and writing notes here, so I was very, very excited to hear his thoughts here. I think the question from Vinita, I think one of the elements, given that agility is seen as a must-have attribute today in a leader, I think one of the elements I have discovered for myself is really the 360-degree feedback, which is an excellent way to put, as Satish said, the mirror to yourself. Because the perception that the leader has that typically he or she thinks is very agile. Even I might think I'm very agile, but I think when you get the feedback from across, which includes not just the people within your organization, but also people whom you partner with in your agencies and the ecosystem, is a big, huge revelation. And my thought on that would be to see that particular set of areas which could be of interest both for the coach and the coachee, mostly for the coachee.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And now this is the question provoking the panel for both of you. And this one comes from Vivek Sharma, who is a training lead at AstraZeneca. He says, hiring people for the capability we don't have. Did we do this to run our organization or to coach them? How is it beneficial for them? Is it not commensal relationship rather than intention of coaching, which is for their goals, not our incapacities, or sorry, not our incapabilities?
Wow. Satish, you would like to take that on?
It's a bit of a complicated one. I mean, did we do this to run our organization or to coach them? Uh, you don't hire people to coach them. And Vivek, by the way, I'm going to get a bit more didactic and directive, since AstraZeneca is the child of a company that in ICI was very integral part of Imperial Chemical Industries as the pharma division, and I had a lot of fond learning in that part of the world. So why did we hire them? We hired them because we made a strategic choice between make and buy. And I'm assuming that you are hiring certain capabilities that you don't have. And in your trade off, hiring from outside is the best decision for the organization which needs that. Uh, when you groom them for higher levels of responsibility, you're not trying to coach them for what they already are very good at. You're trying to coach them to help them to be better than they are. So if the assumption is that although you hired for gap in capability, they still are not good enough, for what? And by whose standards? Or are you looking at it by saying, we want them to be even better? They have the potential to be even better. And we believe in that. And that's what we are trying to coach them for.
Yep. Thank you. And I think Joe, Harish is provoking the thought, but both of you shared in a format where you said we don't need to have all the answers, and we should hire people who are better than us, skilled than us, and then groom them for the job. From that perspective, I think he's championing for those who are more skilled than you as a leader. And
Oh,
how
wonderful.
is it fair for them?
Yes. No, I think, to be honest, just to add on and build on what Satish said, I think my little bit of experience, especially around the digital transformation, was that we obviously bringing in, almost like a different species right into the ecosystem. But this species is also looking for a meaning and a contribution they want to make to the organization they actually join. So as they bring in that capability part of it, I think there is a huge opportunity for the organization to also contribute to their journey by giving them a context and environment in which they can actually unleash what they believe would be a better place to deploy their capabilities.
True. And you are average of 5 people you are surrounded with.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And
Just a quick one. I think, we should brand people like Joe talent factories, leadership factories.
absolutely.
People working with guys like this will actually come through the pipeline faster than you need perfect gentlemen in Raymond's. You'll have more perfect gentlemen than
And women,
you
sir.
need. Gentlemen, that's what I was going to hit you on, but he's done it. So I should keep quiet.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. Joe, this is another question from Pavitra. She's picking on the insight that you shared on shepherding your staff, right? She says shepherding involves risk of losing oneself in an effort to protect the flock. What are some risks and losses that you have experienced as a shepherd?
Wonderful question. Haven't really thought of it because this was something where, the purpose of leading went on to the purpose which included an articulation of shepherding. And if I might explain that angle a little bit, I think there is an expectation that the leader stands right in front of the group and leads. And he or she actually tells, right, as to where the group needs to go. And I think my experiences, especially in the VUCA world, is actually quite contrary to that. And I think the way I have thought about it is that the leader probably needs to be somewhere in the middle. And as the flock moves on to hopefully greener pastures, he or she is not really leading the flock, but it's right in the middle of the flock, thinking and probably guiding each of the sheep in that flock as such. Now, what are the risk and loss? I think one of the elements which I watch out for myself is this passion for people should not develop into sympathy, right? And I think this whole thought about the fact when you talk about care, it should not go beyond the fact of, at the behest of the organization. And I think that's really where would be the risk, where you need to balance your heart for the individual in the organization, at the same time be able to keep the interest of the organization in mind. And I think that also means that if the person wants to move on, and it is good for that individual, you should, as a leader, be able to stand up, shake the hand of the person, and encourage the person to move on rather than stay in the flock.
Absolutely. And Joe, a quote that comes to my mind right now is deprived cannot provide.
Yes.
As a leader, self-care is something very important. Thanks, Yeah, for bringing it up. I'm not getting the name of the person who asked that question. Pavitra. Yes. Thanks,
Pavitra.
Pavitra, for
Thank you,
bringing it up.
Pavitra.
Thank you.
But Satish had something to add.
Yeah.
No, I just saying that in some of the disciplines like psychotherapy and psychiatry, the phrase is a little off-putting, but it is realistic. Uh, when you seek to establish a helping relationship, you make the first step from the insanity of your world into the insanity of the other's world. And keeping the balance where you remain anchored in your own insanity while engaging with the insanity of the other is a task which is extremely challenging. And if you're mindful and seek help when you need, I think most people who attempt that do quite well and succeed.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Well said.
I have one question from my end to the panel. We have heard a lot during pandemic that it is important job of a leader to create a psychologically safe environment, right? And in your pitch as well, you alluded to it. Are there any specific areas that you think a leader should do better, and the coaching skills of a leader, or the coaching environment or a culture in organization, how can we bring about psychological safety?
Satish, you want to go in first?
Yeah, I think very quickly there is a ethical foundation to a lot of the work, whether it's coaching, mentoring, 360 feedback, whatever you do in HR or in organizations that deals with people. The technology and the tools and tackle of this trade have become well written up protocols, either under safeguarding, which is a new thing which has emerged in the last 5-7 years on our horizon, and the extension of psychological safety into the occupational health and safety standards. So there is a body of work which has been done there, accessible and available to people to look at, to get triggered into how to do this better. But I think the fundamental is, in our minds, do simple things like the data generated by asking somebody in the organization to give feedback about Bhaskar belongs to whom? Does the right to use that for organizational decision making vest with the organization, the Joes of the world, uh, the individuals who gave the feedback, or the individual to whom the feedback has been given? Those kinds of ethical dilemmas are important to have uh, clarity about before the sense of, because this issue will never be challenged except by somebody who's leaving the organization and doesn't care, and there'll be enough people so when I talked about the whole genuineness and cognitive and effective part, uh, this is the reality. Organizations which are ranked very high in all kinds of places to work or not, and other things, often have an unsafe environment. Everybody knows it, but the public speak, and the collusion or the omerta, the silence, is maintained by the victims as well. Because who wants to be known as a person who works for an unsafe organization or who worked for an unsafe organization? And so it's a tricky one. It's a very valid one. It's an elephant in the room that is normally not openly talked about, but needs to be.
And I think, Bhaskar, for my end, one of my experiences in this, especially given these COVID times, right, where people are working from home and probably disconnected at this point of time to the larger context of the organization, because that's how it is. They are grappling with their own challenges and getting on with their assignments, is really about the leader walking the talk. And I think that's really where there is a gap. So we do ask for feedback, and when people actually give you the feedback, however bitter or critical it might be, if you do not walk the talk, you actually make the environment even more unsafe. And the other way around is true. If the leader walks the talk, there's absolutely a huge amount of a domino effect which takes place, where the environment then starts becoming much more positive and hopefully productive going forward.
Thank you, Joe. In fact, that gives me a segue to point out a comment shared or a question shared in the chat window by Mr. Tarun Kohli. I would like to bring it up here. He says, any tips on how can leaders or coach gain trust of members they cater to? Walking the talk and few other things that you mentioned, I believe.
Three principles from social psychology. People will trust you if there is a sense of in-group, out-group kind of, he's one of us. Whatever that us is, he's one of us. Second, he speaks for us. He stands up for us. And the third is he does things which are in our interest. Fourth is he helps us shape things and ourselves to be better than we are. That's visible, palpable, and you will begin to earn trust.
Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. While Joe tries to come back online, I have one more question for you from the Q&A window. How do you see somatic experience of an organization can be achieved through coaching?
Oh, wow. Frankly, I don't know what the word somatic means.
I think it's about the body. You were earlier talking about mindfulness
I know,
and the body
but
connect. Yeah.
okay, let me try and make some guesses about how uh, the physical experience of an organization, uh, in this sense, is really about meaning attribution. How do I make sense? How do I? Uh, so, for example, if there is a lock on a door of a room that I am supposed to inhabit, one way of making sense of it is locked to keep people out so that I'm safe inside. Another sense making of the same factual data of the physical reality would be it is intended to keep me locked inside. Yeah, so one becomes a safety uh, device created by somebody, the other becomes an imprisonment created by somebody. The minute you give people the key to that lock, the physical meaning can be, completely radically changed. That it is for you to keep yourself safe, or it is for you to let in threats to your well-being. You're in control. So the more people have control over what constitutes, I think, the somatic experience of the organization, and the interpretation of those, the sense making of those can be in a way the agenda of coaching for people who are troubled by it, provided it is their agenda. I don't know whether that helps.
Thank you, sir. In fact, Vinita has explained what is somatic, body, mind, energy in congruence.
Ayo.
Especially the trauma that people are going through. She is asking in that.
Yeah, I mean, that is very different. I mean, I don't want to get caught with using technical words and getting knotted up in that. But what people are going through right now is it is ripping apart the integrity and the congruence of multiple senses, multiple levels at which we exist, multiple ways in which it is impacting us. So there are three levels of dealing with it that I feel are imperative. There is a triage level, which is immediate, absolutely, whether mental well-being, health, physical care, whatever. And that needs to be addressed immediately. You need to have a mechanism by which you're sensitizing your people to pick up those signals and act on it. The second is to actually provide for instances and mechanisms of a physical nature which will address or alleviate some of these fractures in these multiple dimensions. And the third is to build something that is resilient and flexible to take the turbulence that is coming at us and will be a part of our going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pradhan. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry for this.
No, Murphy strikes, right? We are all prepared for any of these. So
yeah, but Joe strikes back.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's a really honor to hear your wisdom and practical experience. I have not heard any of the academic models or jargons through this conversation, which is a really heartening thing for all of us here. And this is an event jointly hosted by Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, and Pune chapters in association with ICF Global. And there are many sponsors who made this possible. My sincere gratitude to all of them and all the audience who stayed with us till the end. Thank you so much. And you know how to connect with both Joe and Mr. Pradhan. Please feel free to connect if you have any questions. My apologies if I could not take all the questions from all of you in this session due to time constraint. Thank you so much. Stay safe, all of you.